I was just a 22-year-old veterinarian making a routine visit to a quiet cowboy ranch. I thought I was there to examine a few sick animals. Nothing more. But before I left that ranch, the cowboy looked into my eyes and asked me for something I never expected. At first, I believed it was only about his animals. Couldn't have been more wrong, because every visit pulled me deeper into a secret I never saw coming. And the day I finally discovered the truth, my entire life changed forever. Was he simply being kind? Or was this cowboy quietly falling in love with me? I'm Oliver, a 22-year-old veterinarian, and if you had asked me as a kid what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have answered without thinking twice. I want to help animals. While my classmates dreamed about becoming athletes, firefighters, or famous musicians, I spent my afternoons rescuing injured birds, feeding stray dogs, and convincing my parents to let every lost kitten stay at our house, just for one night. That one night usually turned into a week. My mom used to laugh and say, "One day you're going to run a zoo instead of a home." Maybe she wasn't completely wrong. Growing up in Montana, animals weren't just part of life. They were family. Every ranch, every farm, every small town had people who depended on healthy horses, cattle, sheep, and working dogs. I admired veterinarians more than anyone. They didn't just save animals. They helped entire families protect their livelihoods. That dream stayed with me through high school, college, and veterinary school. The years were long. The exams were harder than I ever imagined. There were nights when I barely slept because I had another anatomy test waiting the next morning. There were weekends when my friends went hiking while I stayed in the lab studying diseases and emergency procedures. But every sacrifice felt worth it the first time I treated an injured animal on my own. Nothing compared to watching a frightened animal slowly calm down because it realized I wasn't there to hurt it. That feeling never got old. After graduating, I accepted a position with a veterinary clinic that served ranches across western Montana. Every week was different. Some mornings I vaccinated newborn calves before sunrise. Other days I treated injured horses, rescued trapped wildlife, or helped deliver baby goats in the middle of snowstorms. It wasn't glamorous. My truck was almost always dusty. My boots were rarely clean. And somehow, I loved every second of it. One Monday morning, just after finishing paperwork at the clinic, my supervisor walked into my office carrying a clipboard. "Morning, Oliver. Morning. I've got a new client for you." He handed me the file. Jaxon Walker Ridge Ranch. Annual livestock health inspection. 2 horses need examinations. 1 border collie has been limping for several days. I glanced at the address. It was almost an hour outside town. "First time working with them?" I asked. He nodded. "They've heard good things about you." That caught me off guard. "About me? You've got a reputation." I laughed. "I've only been here 8 months. 8 months is long enough when ranchers start talking. They trust you." Hearing that made me smile. Trust meant everything in my profession. Animals couldn't tell me what hurt. Their owners had to believe I was doing everything possible to help. I grabbed my medical bag, loaded extra vaccines into the truck, and started the drive west. Montana always had a way of making you slow down. Rolling hills stretched for miles beneath an endless blue sky. Wildflowers covered the roadside. Horses grazed behind old wooden fences. Mountains rose in the distance like silent guardians watching over the valley. By the time my GPS announced I had arrived, I understood why people rarely left this place. Walker Ridge Ranch was enormous. A long gravel driveway led toward a beautiful farmhouse surrounded by acres of open pasture. Several horses wandered peacefully near a large red barn. Dozens of cattle grazed farther out across the fields. The entire ranch looked like something straight out of an old Western movie. I parked my truck and stepped outside. Before I could even close the door, a friendly golden retriever came running toward me, wagging its tail so hard its whole body shook. "Hey there, buddy." I crouched down and scratched behind its ears. "You must be the welcoming committee." A deep voice called from across the yard. "Looks like Duke already approves of you." I looked up. A tall man wearing worn blue jeans, brown cowboy boots, and a tan work shirt walked toward me with an easy smile. Sunlight caught the brim of his weathered cowboy hat. He looked about my age, maybe a little older. There was something calm about him, confident without trying. He extended his hand. "You must be Dr. Oliver." I shook it. "And you must be Jaxon, the one and only." His handshake was firm, but he didn't let go immediately. For a brief second, he simply smiled. Then he released my hand. "I'm glad you made it. So am I." "Beautiful place you've got here." His smile grew wider. "Thanks. Been in my family for 3 generations." He glanced toward the horses. "They're the real owners." I laughed. "I've met a lot of horses. They definitely act like they own everything." "They do." For some reason, talking with him felt surprisingly natural. Usually, first visits were all business. Medical history, vaccination records, health concerns. But standing there in the morning sun, it felt less like meeting a client and more like meeting someone I'd known much longer. Jaxon led me toward the stable. "We've got 2 horses I'd like you to check first." Inside the barn, the smell of fresh hay filled the air. Sunlight streamed through the wooden walls. The horses looked healthy, calm, and well cared for. As I examined the first horse, Jaxon stayed nearby, paying close attention to everything I explained. "So that's why you've been favoring your left leg," I said while gently checking the horse's shoulder. Jaxon frowned. "Nothing serious?" "Fortunately, no. Just some muscle strain." He let out a quiet sigh of relief. "I've been worried all week." "You caught it early." He smiled. "Guess calling the vet was the right move." "It usually is." He chuckled. The next couple of hours passed quickly. We checked every animal on the list. The border collie happily accepted treats after I examined its injured paw. Several calves received routine vaccinations. The horses were healthier than I'd expected. It was obvious Jaxon genuinely cared about every animal on the ranch. Not because they were valuable, because they mattered to him. As I finished writing my notes beside my truck, Jaxon walked over carrying 2 steaming cups. "I figured you've earned a coffee." I looked up, surprised. "You didn't have to." "I know." He handed me the cup anyway. "But I wanted to." I accepted it with a grateful smile. "Thanks." We stood together overlooking the fields while a cool breeze rolled across the ranch. For a few quiet moments, neither of us said anything. It wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Eventually, he asked about veterinary school. I asked how long he'd been running the ranch. The conversation drifted from animals to childhood memories, favorite places in Montana, and the little things that made ranch life special. Time slipped away without either of us noticing. When I finally checked my watch, I realized I needed to head back before my afternoon appointments. "I should get going." Jaxon nodded slowly. "Yeah, of course." I packed my equipment into the truck. Just as I reached for the driver's door, I heard him call my name. "Oliver." I turned around. He rubbed the back of his neck, almost as if he were debating whether to ask something. "Would you mind giving me your personal number?" I blinked. "My personal number?" He nodded. "Sometimes questions come up after clinic hours. I'd rather ask you directly than bother the front desk every time." That sounded perfectly reasonable. I smiled, unlocked my phone, and handed it to him. "No problem." He entered his contact information before giving the phone back. "Thanks. Hopefully your animals won't need me too often." He laughed. "I hope so too." I climbed into my truck, waved goodbye, and drove down the long gravel road. At the time, I believed I'd simply gained another client. I had absolutely no idea that giving Jaxon my phone number was about to change both of our lives forever. A few days passed, and life settled back into its usual rhythm. Every morning, I arrived at the clinic before sunrise. Some days were packed with appointments, while others brought emergency calls that sent me racing across the countryside. I treated everything from injured hawks to newborn calves, and by the time I got home each evening, I was usually exhausted. I hadn't thought much about Jaxon after my visit. Sure, he seemed like a genuinely kind guy, but I met dozens of ranch owners every month. Friendly conversations came with the job. Then, one Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed. "Jaxon, Hey, document, sorry to bother you. One of my horses skipped most of its dinner tonight. Should I be worried? I smiled. It sounded exactly like the kind of question a concerned rancher would ask. I replied with a few questions about the horse's behavior, temperature, and water intake. After exchanging a handful of messages, we figured it was probably nothing serious. Before ending the conversation, another message appeared. Thanks for answering after work. I owe you another coffee. I laughed quietly to myself. Only if the patient makes a full recovery. Deal. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it became the beginning of something neither of us expected. Over the next couple of weeks, Jaxon texted me every few days. Sometimes it was about a horse. Sometimes it was about one of his cattle. Other times it wasn't about animals at all. You'll never believe what Duke did today. He sent a picture of the golden retriever sitting proudly beside a wheelbarrow he'd somehow managed to tip over. I couldn't stop laughing. Looks like he's supervising the ranch. He's convinced he's the boss. A few minutes later, another photo arrived. This time, Duke was asleep in the shade with one paw covering his nose. Tough day at work. Without realizing it, I found myself looking forward to his messages. They were simple, funny, comforting. Even on stressful days at the clinic, seeing Jaxon's name appear on my phone somehow made me smile. One evening, while I was finishing paperwork, my coworker Emily walked past my office. You've been smiling at your phone a lot lately. I looked up. What? She crossed her arms with a grin. Who is he? There isn't a he. Aha. Seriously. She pointed toward my phone. You've checked it 3 times in the last 10 minutes. I have clients. You also blush. I do not. Emily laughed. I'm just saying, whoever's texting you seems to be making your day. I shook my head, trying to ignore the warmth creeping into my face. It's just a ranch owner asking questions. If you say so. She walked away still smiling. I rolled my eyes. She was reading far too much into it. At least that's what I kept telling myself. A week later, the clinic received another appointment from Walker Ridge Ranch. One of Jaxon's young calves had developed a mild respiratory infection. My supervisor glanced over the schedule. Looks like you're heading back to Walker Ridge tomorrow. I nodded. I'll take care of it. For reasons I couldn't explain, I actually looked forward to the drive. The next morning, the familiar ranch came into view beneath a bright blue sky. As soon as I stepped out of the truck, Duke sprinted toward me again, barking excitedly. Hey, buddy. He jumped happily around my legs as though we'd been friends for years. Jaxon appeared from the barn carrying a bucket of feed. There you are. He smiled so naturally that I found myself smiling back. Good to see you again. You too. For a brief second, we simply stood there. Felt strangely familiar, almost comfortable, like seeing an old friend instead of someone I'd only met once. We examined the sick calf together. Fortunately, the infection had been caught early. After listening to its breathing and checking its temperature, I prepared the necessary medication. It should recover just fine. Jaxon let out a relieved breath. I was hoping you'd say that. You noticed the symptoms quickly. I pay attention. I can tell. He smiled. I learned from the best. I laughed. Don't give me that much credit. You've earned it. There was something sincere about the way he said it. Not exaggerated. Not flattering. Just honest. After finishing the examination, I started packing my equipment. I'll get out of your way. Actually, he hesitated. I made lunch. I looked at him. You made lunch? He nodded. I figured you'd probably skip eating like last time. I blinked. You remembered that? You spent 3 hours here and only drank coffee. I hadn't expected him to notice something so small. Come on, he said. It's nothing fancy. A few minutes later, we were sitting on the wide wooden porch overlooking the ranch. The view was incredible. Green fields stretched toward distant mountains. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass. The horses wandered peacefully through the pasture. For a while, we talked about everything except work. Favorite movies, music, travel, childhood memories. He told me stories about growing up on the ranch, learning to ride horses before he was old enough to reach the stirrups. I shared memories of rescuing injured animals as a kid and driving my parents crazy by bringing every stray home. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his lemonade. I would have done the same thing. I don't doubt it. There was an easy rhythm between us now. No awkward silences. No pressure. Just two people enjoying each other's company. As lunch came to an end, I glanced at my watch. I should head back. His smile faded just a little. Already? I've got afternoon appointments. Right? He looked out across the fields for a moment before speaking again. You know something? What? He rubbed the back of his neck, looking oddly nervous. I wasn't completely disappointed when that calf got sick. I frowned. What do you mean? He laughed softly. I mean, I hated seeing him sick. He paused. But part of me was glad it gave you a reason to come back. For a second, I wasn't sure I'd heard him correctly. You wanted me to come back? He met my eyes with a shy smile. I enjoyed spending time with you. The words hung quietly between us. My heart skipped once. I didn't know what to say. Was he just being friendly? Or was there something more behind those words? Before I could figure it out, Jaxon stood up and picked up the empty plates. Anyway, he said with a grin, next time I'll make a better lunch. Next time. He said it so naturally, as though he already believed there would be one. I climbed into my truck a few minutes later, but instead of starting the engine right away, I sat there staring through the windshield. His words echoed in my mind. Part of me was glad it gave you a reason to come back. I told myself he was simply a friendly cowboy who appreciated having a veterinarian he trusted. That had to be it. Still, as I drove away from Walker Ridge Ranch, I caught myself smiling the entire way home, completely unaware that Jaxon's feelings were growing much deeper than either of us had dared to admit. The weeks that followed felt different, even if neither of us admitted it out loud. Our conversations became part of my daily routine. Some mornings Jaxon would send me a picture of the sunrise over the ranch. Thought you'd appreciate this view. Other days it was a funny video of Duke chasing chickens that clearly had no intention of being caught. I found myself doing the same. Whenever I treated an unusual animal or spotted a beautiful mountain view during one of my drives, I'd send him a picture. It stopped feeling like a veterinarian talking to a client. It felt like two friends who genuinely cared about hearing from each other. One Friday afternoon, the clinic received another call from Walker Ridge Ranch. This time, it wasn't an emergency. Jaxon wanted me to perform a routine health inspection before several of his horses entered a local ranch competition. Since I already knew the ranch and the animals, my supervisor assigned the visit to me without hesitation. Early Saturday morning, I loaded my truck and headed toward Walker Ridge once again. As I turned onto the familiar gravel road, I couldn't help smiling. Somehow the place already felt familiar. Duke spotted my truck before anyone else did. He came racing across the yard with so much excitement that he nearly knocked himself over trying to stop. Easy there, buddy. I laughed, scratching behind his ears. You keep greeting me like this, and I'm going to think you're my biggest fan. He definitely is. Jaxon's voice came from behind me. I turned around. He looked relaxed in a dark denim shirt with the sleeves rolled up and his usual cowboy boots. His smile appeared the moment our eyes met. Morning, document. Morning. You made good time. Not much traffic when your destination is the middle of nowhere. He laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. It is. The inspection lasted most of the morning. Every horse was healthy. The cattle looked stronger than ever. Even the border collie had completely recovered from the injured paw I'd treated weeks earlier. You've been taking excellent care of them? I said while finishing my notes. Jaxon shrugged modestly. They deserve it. I couldn't agree more. As I packed away my equipment, I expected the visit to end like all the others. Instead, Jaxon looked at me with a hopeful expression. If you're not in a rush, I'm listening. I was wondering if you'd like to stay for dinner. I hesitated. Normally, I avoided accepting invitations from clients. Professional boundaries mattered. But somehow, Jaxon no longer felt like just another client. He felt different. I checked the time. My afternoon schedule was clear. I'd like that. His smile widened immediately. Great. The farmhouse felt warm and welcoming. Soft country music played quietly from an old speaker in the kitchen. The smell of grilled steak, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread filled the air. You cooked all of this yourself? I asked. Jaxon nodded. My grandmother taught me. She did a good job. I hope you still think that after dinner. A few minutes later, we were sitting across from each other at a wooden dining table near a large window overlooking the pastures. The sun was beginning to set, painting the fields with shades of gold and orange. For a while, we talked about ordinary things, movies, favorite foods, travel dreams. Then the conversation became more personal. Jaxon looked out the window for a moment before speaking. Can I ask you something? Sure. Have you ever felt lonely? His question caught me by surprise. I thought about it before answering. Sometimes. Even with friends? I nodded. Being surrounded by people doesn't always mean you feel understood. He smiled faintly. I know exactly what you mean. There was a long silence. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. I've spent most of my life on this ranch, Jaxon said quietly. I love this place. You can tell. But sometimes, he continued, it gets quiet. I looked at him. The kind of quiet that reminds you something's missing. I understood that feeling better than I wanted to admit. Veterinary work kept me constantly busy. I met hundreds of people every year. But when I went home at night, the apartment was always silent. Sometimes I wondered whether I had devoted so much of my life to my career that I'd forgotten to build a life outside of it. I get it, I admitted. Jaxon looked relieved. I wasn't sure anyone else would. The sky outside slowly darkened. Neither of us seemed eager for the evening to end. We carried our coffee onto the porch where the air had become cooler. Crickets sang in the distance. The horses wandered peacefully beneath the fading sunset. I've always liked it out here at night, Jaxon said. It feels peaceful. It does. We sat side by side in comfortable silence. For once, neither of us felt the need to fill every quiet moment with conversation. After several minutes, I felt something lightly brush against my hand. I glanced down.
Jaxon's fingers rested gently beside mine.
He wasn't grabbing my hand. He wasn't forcing anything. He simply left it there, giving me every opportunity to move away if I wanted. Instead, without really thinking about it, I turned my hand slightly until our fingers touched. A warm smile spread across his face. He slowly intertwined his fingers with mine. His hand was warm and steady. Neither of us spoke. Some moments didn't need words. After a while, he finally broke the silence. Oliver. Yeah. I've been trying to convince myself that this was just friendship. I turned toward him. But every time your truck disappears down that road. He looked away for a second before meeting my eyes again. I wish you'd stay a little longer. My heart began beating faster. Everything suddenly made sense. The coffee, the lunches, the messages, the way he always seemed genuinely happy whenever I arrived. He hadn't been looking forward to another veterinary visit. He'd been looking forward to seeing me. I took a slow breath. I didn't realize. I know. I thought I was imagining things. You weren't. He smiled nervously. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. You aren't. His shoulders relaxed slightly. I just didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I never told you. I looked out across the moonlit ranch. Somewhere in the distance, Duke barked once before settling down again. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees. For weeks I'd been telling myself there couldn't possibly be anything more between us. But if I was honest, I looked forward to every message, every visit, every conversation. I found excuses to drive a little slower when leaving the ranch because part of me wasn't ready to say goodbye. Maybe my feelings had been growing too. I turned back toward Jaxon. A smile slowly appeared on my face. I've been looking forward to every excuse to come here. His eyes softened. Really? I nodded. I just didn't know why until now. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Jaxon quietly asked, "Can I do something I've wanted to do for a long time?" I smiled. "You can ask." He leaned forward slowly, giving me plenty of time to stop him if I wanted. Instead of stepping back, I closed the small distance between us. Our lips met in a gentle, heartfelt kiss that lasted only a few seconds, but somehow said everything neither of us had been able to put into words. When we pulled apart, we couldn't stop smiling. Jaxon let out a quiet laugh. "Good." He raised an eyebrow. "Good. Because I don't think either of us is imagining this anymore." He reached for my hand again, and this time I held it without hesitation. As we sat together beneath the Montana stars, surrounded by the peaceful ranch that had brought us together, I realized something unexpected. I had come to Walker Ridge believing my job was to care for animals. I never imagined that somewhere between treating horses, sharing coffee, and watching sunsets, someone would quietly find a place in my heart. The days after that evening felt brighter than anything I could remember. Nothing about our relationship happened overnight. We didn't rush into making promises or changing our lives. Instead, we let everything grow naturally, just as it had from the beginning. I still visited Walker Ridge Ranch as its veterinarian whenever my work required it, but outside of those appointments, Jaxon and I started spending our weekends together. Sometimes we'd ride horses through the rolling hills at sunrise. Other times we'd sit on the old wooden fence with cups of coffee, watching the cattle graze while Duke happily chased butterflies across the fields. Those quiet moments became my favorite part of every week. For the first time in years, I wasn't always thinking about work. I had someone who reminded me to slow down and enjoy life. One Saturday afternoon, while we were repairing a broken fence together, Jaxon looked over at me with a smile. "You know something?" "What?" "I don't think Duke likes you anymore." I laughed. "Really?" "He loves you." Almost on cue, Duke ran over carrying one of my work gloves in his mouth. I held out my hand. "You planning on giving that back?" Instead, he wagged his tail and sprinted away. Jaxon burst into laughter. "Looks like you've lost it." "Oh, I'm getting that glove back." The two of us ended up chasing the dog across the pasture, laughing harder than either of us had in months. By the time Duke finally surrendered the glove, we were both out of breath. Jaxon looked at me and shook his head. "I haven't laughed like this in years." "Me neither." Moments like that reminded me that happiness didn't always come from big adventures. Sometimes it came from the simplest things. A shared laugh, a beautiful sunset, or a stubborn dog who refused to return a work glove. A few weeks later, life reminded us that ranching wasn't always peaceful. Late one evening, dark clouds rolled across the Montana sky. The wind picked up quickly. By the time I finished my last appointment at the clinic, my phone began ringing. It was Jaxon. The moment I answered, I heard the sound of strong wind in the background. "Oliver." "Jaxon? What's wrong?" A section of the north fence came down. My heart sank. "The horses. A few of them got loose." "I'll be there." I didn't hesitate. Within minutes, I was driving toward Walker Ridge as heavy rain began falling across the highway. Lightning flashed across the mountains. The usually peaceful ranch looked completely different beneath the storm. When I arrived, Jaxon was already searching the fields with a flashlight. "I'm glad you're here. We'll find them." Together we organized neighbors who had come to help. Everyone spread out across the property. Some searched on horseback. Others checked nearby roads to make sure none of the animals wandered into traffic. For nearly 3 hours we searched through wind and rain. Finally, just after midnight, we found the last missing horse standing safely beneath a group of tall pine trees. Jaxon gently placed his hand on the horse's neck. "There you are." I examined the animal carefully. "A few scratches." I smiled. "But otherwise he's perfectly fine." Jaxon let out a long breath of relief. "So are all of them." As we slowly walked the horses back toward the ranch, neither of us said much. We didn't need to. Simply knowing every animal was safe felt like a victory. The following morning, exhausted but relieved, we sat together on the porch watching the sunrise after the storm. "I couldn't have done that without you," Jaxon said quietly. I smiled. You would've. Maybe. He looked at me. But I'm really glad I didn't have to. I squeezed his hand. So am I. Life slowly returned to normal after that. Summer turned into early autumn. The hills around Walker Ridge glowed with shades of gold and orange. Everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place. Then one unexpected phone call changed everything. It came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was finishing paperwork at the clinic. Hello. This is Dr. Oliver. The woman on the other end introduced herself as the director of a large veterinary hospital in Denver, Colorado. Months earlier, I had applied for a specialist training program, never expecting to hear back. Now they were offering me the position. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Advanced training, excellent pay, a chance to work with some of the country's leading veterinary specialists. There was only one problem. It was nearly 800 miles away. That evening, I drove to Walker Ridge with my mind spinning. Jaxon knew something was wrong the moment he saw me. What happened? I handed him the letter. He read it slowly. When he finished, he looked back at me with a gentle smile. Oliver, this is everything I've worked toward. I know. But if I accept it, my voice faded. I'll have to leave. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Jaxon folded the letter and handed it back. I love this ranch. I know. It's my home. I nodded, unsure where he was going. Then he smiled. But home isn't just a place anymore. I looked at him. It's wherever the people you love are. Emotion caught in my throat. You'd really leave all this? He glanced across the fields where the horses peacefully grazed beneath the evening sky. My grandfather built this ranch. My dad taught me everything I know here. I'll always love it. He looked back at me. But dreams matter. So does love. I felt tears forming in my eyes. I don't want you giving up your life because of me. He shook his head. I'm not giving anything up. I'm choosing the life I want. A week later, after many conversations, we reached a decision together. I accepted the specialist program. Jaxon hired a trusted ranch manager to oversee the daily operations while he divided his time between the ranch and Denver. It wasn't the easiest path, but it was ours. On my final evening before leaving for Colorado, we stood together beside the pasture where we'd first shared coffee after my very first farm visit. The horses grazed quietly as the sun disappeared behind the Montana mountains. I smiled at Jaxon. You know, I came here because a ranch needed a veterinarian. He laughed softly. And now, I thought I was coming to save animals. I reached for his hand. I never imagined someone here would completely change my life. Jaxon smiled, his blue eyes shining in the fading sunlight. And I only asked for your phone number because I wanted a way to see you again. I laughed. So it really wasn't just about the horses. He grinned. Not even a little. We both laughed. Then he gently wrapped his arms around me, and I hugged him back as the cool Montana breeze swept across the ranch. Looking around at the fields, the horses, the old red barn, and the place where our story had begun, I realized something important. Life doesn't always lead us where we expect to go. Sometimes, the road you travel to follow your dream quietly leads you to another dream you never knew you were searching for. And as Jaxon and I walked hand in hand toward the farmhouse with Duke happily running ahead of us, I knew one thing for certain. The best part of my journey had never been becoming a veterinarian. It had been finding love where I least expected it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button and let me know in the comments. Do you think Jaxon fell in love with Oliver the very first day they met? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoy emotional gay romance stories with heartfelt endings, beautiful characters, and unforgettable journeys, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next romance story.